Number 3, convene a peace conference. Convene a peace conference. Conflict is seldom settled accidentally. It must be dealt with intentionally. There's a couple of a father-son team that talk a lot about conflict in relationships, and they came up with something that some of you who've been in my office have heard me talk about, what's called the McDonald's technique. The McDonald's technique is that old technique, you know, when you pulled in a McDonald's drive-thru before it used to print up what you ordered, you'd pull up and they'd say, "Welcome to McDonald's, may I take your order, please?" And you say, "Yes, I would like A, B, and C." And the person would say, "Okay, like A, B, and C, is that correct?" And you would go, "Yes," and they would say, "Well, the amount you owe is this. Please pull forward." You were welcomed. You were asked what you wanted. It was repeated back to you what you wanted, and then you were invited to pull forward and pay. Convening a peace conference is finding a time that's good for both of you to deal with the conflict. And a month ahead is not the answer, okay? But neither is the final 2 minutes of the Super Bowl. We have to be aware of each other and say, we need to talk sometime today. We need to talk sometime in the next few hours or in the next hour. We need to sit down and be together and discuss some things. Come together in a peace conference. Matthew 5 says, if you remember that someone has something against you, leave your gift at the altar and go at once to make peace. Then come back and offer your gift to God. You know, the Bible says if we're having conflict with somebody else, if we're having conflict in our marriage, it affects our prayers. And maybe you're wondering sometimes why your prayers aren't being answered is because you're not dealing with some things in your life. Because if you have bitterness in your heart and anger and rage, it keeps you from worshiping God. You cannot truly come to God until you've settled some of those things. Jesus says don't ignore conflict. So quickly, some ways to deal with this peace conference. Choose the right time. Choose the right place. Bed is not the place to settle conflicts, okay? And then before you begin your peace conference, pray for each other and come with a positive attitude, knowing that God can help you. Number 4, cut out abusive language. Learn the ground rules of dealing with issues. Establish some things about what's a fair fight. You know, when we're angry and we're hurt, we hurt. Hurt people hurt people. And often we say things and do things in anger that aren't in any way helpful. And when it gets to that point, you really need to call a timeout. But there should be some subjects that you never bring up in anger. In-laws is often one of them. Okay? It doesn't help to bring them up to hurt somebody. We've got to find ways to communicate. Do you know that when we were in the midst of the Cold War, Russia and America would get together almost annually and sit down and talk about what weapons they would agree never to use? They came up with ground rules about how to fight. Marriages need those as well. We can't hurt each other because it damages the relationship. Colossians 3:8 says it this way: you must put away all things, furious rage, malice, insult, and shouted abuse. Don't deceive each other with lies anymore. You hear that? Furious rage, malice, where you intentionally hurt somebody, insults, where you're causing pain, shouted abuse, and lies. You must be truthful with each other. Number 5, I must consider my mate's perspective. I must consider my mate's perspective. Don't just look at your own situation. Now, folks, this is unnatural. We are egocentric. We see things from our own point of view. And it takes somebody intentional to step outside and try to see it for somebody else's perspective. What's going on with the other person? Earlier, I mentioned to you the McDonald's technique. Part of that technique is once you agree on a meeting is to sit and to talk about what's going on. You come together, and one person shares what's going on with them. Not all about what you're doing, it's about what's going on with me. Like if I get together with my wife Paula and I tell her all the things she's doing wrong, which is very few, okay? Clear about that. Then all I'm doing is attacking. But if I go to Paula and say, I'm really struggling right now, or I'm hurt, or I'm angry, or I'm sad, she can't tell me, oh, you don't feel that, because I do. But if I bring up facts or opinions, we can debate those all day long. Coming together, talking and sharing what's going on. And then when one person has shared, before the other responds, because you know what we do when somebody's talking, don't you? We're thinking about our response. But before you share your thoughts or response, make sure you've understood. Like at McDonald's, I want A, B, and C. Your order is A, B, and C. Repeat back what has been said. Do you know why people raise their voices in arguments? Because maybe if I raise my voice, you'll hear me better. When in truth, don't we kind of tune people out who raise their voice like that? But that's the natural response, because we don't think we're being heard. Stop and make sure you understand the other person's side.